Welcome back to Too Much Popcorn, the movie review podcast where Jimmy and I watch a movie and we sit down, we talk about the things we like, the things we didn't like about the movie, the highs, the lows, and, just the general minutia of a movie. We really dig into it. And ultimately, we try and come to the conclusion of, would we recommend this to people, whether you've seen it or not? We're just trying to get rid of the whole grading system and just think about movies in a general term of, would I recommend this to somebody? Yes or no? And this week...
Return to form.
Yeah. Back in the good old days when you would watch a movie and then tell somebody, hey, watch this movie, or don't. Yeah. So this week, we watched the hit 2023 film. That's right. I don't remember the horn sound for that.
I don't think we had one.
But we got a new movie watch. This one is crisp, right off the presses.
Ooh, it's so hot. Ow. Ooh.
Jimmy pulled it out of the oven along with the popcorn. He cooks it in the oven, and he put it in the movie watcher, and we were watching it, and ooh, it was a new one. It was a new one, folks, and you're all wondering what it's titled, but you're not, because it's in the title of whatever you're watching. That's right. It is No One Will Save You, starring Caitlin Dever and a whole bunch of creepy guys.
Ooh, a little clicker men. I hate them.
Little nasty finger boys.
Little E.T. boys, just trying to reach out and phone home.
Yeah, so... What did you think, Jimmy? What'd you think?
This was a movie that I went in not knowing a lot. I was like, okay, we have a sort of alien abduction movie going on right from the graphic, right? There's like some person being lifted out of this house, and you're like, okay, well, I guess once you're in the beam, no one's going to save you. That makes a lot of sense. What I did not expect was the instantaneous sort of vibe of another favorite alien movie of mine, Signs. But instead of the sort of creeping dread of Signs where you don't really know what the aliens look like, the entire movie is spent barely showing them in any way, and the actual reveal in Signs is the like key sort of terrifying moment to me in that movie. This movie is like the end of Signs, where you finally are like deep into sort of already the dread of understanding that there are aliens outside your farmhouse, and you are suddenly under siege, besieged by these aliens for then the rest of the movie. And I was like, this is the movie? I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I knew I'm going to go with absolutely nothing about this movie. As always, Hulu the other day was like, hey, we're going to start showing you this trailer for this movie. And as always, I scrolled right past it and said, I don't care. I'm going to go watch something I've seen 1,000 times.
Yeah, Hitman.
Hitman Agent 47. It gets better at viewing 47, funny enough.
Rupert Friend to us is now a true friend.
Yeah. We got him on the pocket. No, we don't.
No, we don't. I bet he'd love to talk about this movie, though.
Hey, you know what? Rupert, if you're out there, come on. You can pay us to be on the show. I think he's in the
new Wes Anderson, like the Asteroid City. I think he's in that one.
No way.
I swear. He's back. He's back in a big way.
2023 is his year. It's almost over, and it's his year.
Agent 48. Here we come.
So, yeah, I knew nothing about this film, and then when Jimmy pulled it out of the oven, he said, ooh, I got this good alien flick for us tonight. And I said, okay. And yeah, as always, anytime there's an alien movie, my expectations, I would say, are at zero, because I think, in all honesty, back when I watched Signs the first time, I was like, expectations were high then. I was young, I was immature, and I was like, my expectations are up here, and it delivered very low below that bar that I wanted.
The last Alien movie you saw was The Phantom Menace. And you can't get any higher than that.
Yeah. Man, that Jar Jar guy freaks me out.
Dude, what a freak, that guy.
No, but I mean, like, yeah. So, to say the least, my expectations were very low. And then this movie instantly came in and was like, hey, it's creepy as fuck.
Yeah.
And you're like, how are they going to... And, like, anytime... This is another thing with movies and me. Anytime I see PG-13, my expectations for the creep factor is instantly like 5 below where it should be. I'm like, there is no way that I can be sufficiently creeped out by a PG-13 movie. Like,
you mean teens can go see this? Unacceptable.
They are playing with limits, and they're playing with the rails up on a bowling alley, and so I'm like, there's no way that they can do something that's gonna freak me out. I need full Saw viscera to really get at me. But this movie did it, and it wasn't just the aliens. It was the sound design in this movie was so good.
Yeah. Instantaneously too. I think it was literally second one of the movie. They start playing this little synth drill that is indicative of some sort of like alien machinery or biologic sort of situation. And like Aaron and I locked eyes as like, oh no, this is a spooky sound. I mean, perfect for an October film, just to sort of immerse yourself in this just ominously lit sound design. Like, there were so many elements of this that were so perfect for not only like an alien movie, but sort of a tense thriller, like slash horror movie where you're expecting sort of a jump scares type situation or just an ominous feeling in general. I like that, Aaron, you were like, I said it was a good movie before we watched it, and I'm like, I have no idea what this movie will bring us. I saw some buzz about it, I think probably on Twitter, just because, you got to run that Twitter account. But I really know nothing now. Even after watching it, I still know very little. But we've watched it, and there were so many good elements of it that were, I think, to me, when you think of like an alien movie featuring common alien tropes like tractor beams and gray aliens and sort of that whole vibe, there was a perfection of execution that did not ever have me like questioning my buy-in to the film while watching it. I was always just like, I'm here. They're creepy little guys. They're creepy big guys. You got me. It was the one element that I was fully bought in on, was that these guys were real creepy and I hated them a lot. And there's an element, and I think it always comes back to Signs for me, because Signs to me is, I've seen it maybe once or twice, but it's one of my favorite alien movies because it so perfectly is like, we can't show the alien because they look really bad. We don't know how to do it yet. And this movie fully was like, I think we can just do it. And then for the entire movie, you're like, yeah, those are some creepy looking aliens. Sure, they look a little CG if you stare too long at them, but most of the shots are essentially them in just like complete darkness or like one beam of light in there. And you're like, deeply unsettling imagery just based on what you're looking at in most of the frames of this movie.
That was definitely one of my questions going into this was it going to be one of those movies that does the show don't tell or the tell don't show? And it was very much the show don't tell, but it did it very well. And it did it well from the beginning, where like the first time you start getting a glimpse of what they are, they're like shrouded and they're messing around in the main character's house, and you're like, okay, what are they doing? And I really hate this, and they're making sounds, and you're like, I really hate these sounds. And then
sounds,
yeah, and then then you start like seeing them, and at first you're like, oh, I don't think I like this guy. And then he starts moving. You're like, okay, no, I seriously don't like this guy.
Yeah, as soon as he stands up on his little toe feet, you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
This design is honestly awful in a good way. It really unsettles me entirely. Like for every shot, their long fingers, their unsettling head shape, body shape, all that kind of stuff was completely sold in just a way that I truly enjoyed.
And it's super interesting because like we it's 2023 now. Aliens have been done so many times in so many different ways. It's hard for people to make scary aliens. You think of the xenomorph from Alien. That thing's scary. That thing is straight up scary. But you think of some other stuff.
The xenomorph from Alien 3?
Or, the aliens from Arrival. Less scary. But
I don't know. The Arrival aliens are pretty,
yeah,
like tame, like benign, but also there is an ominous scariness to them.
But I think this movie did a good job of playing within that boundary of still being PG-13, but building monsters that were just super unsettling. And I think they did a really good job of having bipedal, human-esque gray man aliens that, by elongating proportions and having different ones with different vibes and, their movement and stuff, I think all those combined together to make them just creepy little guys.
Yeah, that was an unexpected element that I was very pleased with, where you don't only get like the normal humanoid medium-sized creatures, you also get a little creepy guy with big long fingies, and then like a big boy with also big long knife hands, and you're like, ooh, those designs are honestly so terrifying, and I'm glad they're in the movie. They serve the purpose of sort of just like, it felt like a purposeful evolution, right? Where it's like, this is the tiny guy we send in to claw out the eyeballs of whoever like tries to defeat us. And then these are like the long, creepy, psionic ones that just sort of walk around and don't have the same defenses as the creepy boys. But yeah, there was like this hierarchy to their design that was not really explained in the movie, but it felt like, well, these are the ones that do this, these are the ones that do that, and then the big boys are the ones that are like, well, we're done fucking around with these little guys. We got to send big praying mantises to try and really cull whatever's happening down here. And most of the movie is free of any dialogue or really any... it has some written stuff that builds out some of the backstory, but yeah, like free of any dialogue that will explain anything that you actually have a question about without an environmental cue or just visually like designing it in that way to sort of help you out mentally and trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I also think it was interesting. So with one of the ones they had near the end, the way he was moving, I couldn't tell if it was just the way my eyes were picking it up or if it was actually, what was they were doing in the film. But it seemed like they were dropping frames with him, with the way he was moving. Because, like, not only was his movement, like, inhuman, it was, like, that unsettling that you get from a movie that drops frames. And people do it all the time in films where they drop frames to make you feel unsettled because your brain recognizes it. And it was the same exact thing in this one where he's moving and you're like, oh, nope.
Yeah. It was that paired with the sound design of sort of just like a creaking bone, like less musculature than you're expecting. And yeah, the movements were so quick. It does feel like a trick of the eye where you're like, is it just too dark that I can't see them moving? Or are they moving so inhumanly fast that it adds to their sort of otherworldliness?
Yeah. And again, going back to sound design, I really like the way that they did their sound. Because that's another thing that when you do your alien design, there's so many different things you can do with it. You can do growly, you can do things that talk, you can do things that talk in alien language, you can do predator clicks. And it's like, all right, what out there is really the scariest? But this movie chose to do what almost sounded like a creaking house, which I thought was cool because she's in an older house that's made of wood. And, there's that scary part at the beginning where she's trying to, sneak up on one of them and the floors are creaking and it sounds so similar to what they're making. And I thought the way they did that, I thought it was a good choice and it worked.
Yeah, it was. I think there was an emphasis on the house being like the house as its own character, right? So I think the movie starts with a slow zoom in on the house and you get a lot of like character from it. It's like it's got this old roof, it's got this deck, it's got a side sort of dock off this pond area. And so there is like an element of the movie that's sort of like explaining the house to you. And I think, yeah, there has to be, not that the aliens were trying to like mimic the house, but the fact that the house also has its own sort of creepy, ominous vibe to it that then also matches some of the alien sounds. You're like, oh yeah, there is just like similarities between things we create that then become part of a horror in our own mind. But then the main character, Bryn, is like having to both deal with being in a creepy old house by herself, which is by itself a terrifying, like you're already in a horror movie if you're in a 3-story, basement house by yourself, and suddenly the sounds of the house are filled with also the cacophony of alien sounds as well.
Well, and I like that too, because it's like, all right, you've lived in this house presumably your whole life. There's signs around that she's lived there since she was a child.
Yeah.
And, you think you know a place until you are put in one of those situations where you have to defend your house because no one's going to save you. And
the title.
Yeah. And so, you think you know your house, you think that you're ready for really anything, but then something happens and you're trying to sneak up on an alien and the floors are creaking and, this thing that you feel safe inside is now almost fighting against you and giving you away.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was such an early moment. I think that's when literally it switched for me, where I was thinking, oh, the trick of that first shot when you're seeing the shadow of the alien, I almost couldn't tell if it was a shadow of an outside window or the glass that was sort of on the first floor, sort of hanging from the ceiling type thing. And so I was almost like, we've understood that the front door is open, like already that's bad.
Yeah.
But did it come inside or is it just outside, like ready to come inside and she has to close the door really quick? And so there was a moment where I was like, she has to get downstairs and stop that, or she is already in like more grave danger than I even can fully understand. So there was like an element of that where I was confused, but it was like, it was not that I was confused because of how it was shot or in some way. I was just like, I don't know what she should do, because it does feel like there could be danger anywhere besides right where she is. And yeah, it's like the house fully was this entity that had its own agency against her. And you're just like, well, this house is evil now.
Yeah, and I was right there with you because you have the sound coming from inside the house, presumably, of the alien, but then you see that shadow, and you're like, oh, is that outside? Is that inside? Is there more than one?
It was hard to tell.
But, like, it worked so well because you have your main character who doesn't know what's going on, and you're right in the shoes with them, and you're trying to figure stuff out as fast as she is, and it's a nightmare.
Yeah, that first sequence fully, like during the first sort of break-in situation, I bought in fully at that moment. I was like, yo, I don't know what's going on anymore, and she doesn't know what's going on. She seemed to be just having a good time earlier in the day, listening to records and trying to dance along and getting threatening phone calls and all this sort of stuff.
Basic girl stuff.
Basic girl stuff. And suddenly you are in this, like, it is a crossroads of home invasion alien, you know, like there's so many like potential murderous sort of things happening in that moment where you're just like, do I run? Do I fight? Do I, you know, all of the fight or flight instincts kick in at the same time. And you just sort of have to be like, okay, my foot made a really loud noise on the stairs and it heard me. So it's flight time. And here we go. And yeah, that beginning just sort of easing you into what's happening in the movie really got me. Cause I was like, it can't just be her running away from these things. They're already in the house. How is this even possible that we're here already? Like it's been 15 minutes. How are we here now? And yet the escalation is just like, we're here.
Yeah.
You're literally here. We can't go anywhere else now.
Well, and I think beyond that too, like, you know, not to get into super spoiler territory, but the front door to the house gets blown away pretty freaking early into the movie. And you're like,
Yeah.
Okay, so these guys had no problem opening a door, but now the door's just not even there. And so now you have that even like more sense of betrayal from the house where it's like, all right, this thing that like could presumably be safe is now just absolutely not safe. And there is nothing you can do. And yeah, I loved that because I was like, all right, now what do you do? Do you really try and fight and, like you said, Home Alone it? Or do you just try and be like, no, screw this, run away? But in a world where, you know, you don't know what's going on and how many of these other things are out there, what's the point of running away?
You know, what she was missing was just a few buckets full of paint hanging from the rafters. And
a clothes iron from a laundry chute.
Yeah, really hot sort of thing to wrap around the various knobs around the house. She started boiling all that water, though. It was a good start to really, yeah. She was like, I watched Home Alone once. I think there was something very hot in that movie. Was it just water? She almost got it.
Yeah. And
she was boiled a lot of water.
And she was like, oh, I watched Signs and the water worked. So might as well just boil it too, just in case.
Just in case. Double, yeah. Boiling water is better than just regular water.
Yeah. I liked it too because without knowing anything about the movie, it was cool going into it and trying to figure out like, all right, what is the goal of the aliens? And, I'm not going to give that away, but it was fun to try and figure it out because that's, I would say one of the next parts to establishing a good alien in a alien invasion movie is like, what is their ultimate goal? Is it abduct? Is it capture things? Is it to integrate? Like, what do they want? And this movie did a really good job of obfuscating that at the very beginning, and then you quickly figure out what's going on, and the character starts figuring it out.
I think it did the people who were shooting the movie, the cinematographers, the directors, all these decisions that ended up working the best for me were the aerial shots that, again, the movie starts with. There's some excellent transitions and all these things, but the main one that, Aaron, when we were watching and we're literally thrown off, is I think she's driving into town and there's a like lake by the side of the road that is reflecting the sky. And it's not even something that in a movie you wouldn't even really think about it, but because the threat is this, like, you already know that the threat is aliens. Like, you start the movie and you're like, it's an alien movie, okay. And for some reason there's like multiple aerial shots that are just very disturbing to look at, and they further get more disturbing with like more crop circle-y type like imagery and stuff throughout the movie. But like in the beginning, there's no crop circles in a couple aerial shots, and it still like is this like stillness of life that is reflecting the sky and sort of giving you this like huge, it's almost like outer space vision of the earth itself. And that's where I was like, oh, it is weird that like the water technically is like reflecting infinity, right? It's like if it looks into the sky, like technically that's like up into space. And so clearly has to be some sort of like visual thing that was planned in some way, but whatever the lighting and the shot itself sold it so well as this ominous, bigger than you, bigger than the world, like vibe.
Yeah, I think, again, going into this movie, I was like, all right, Jimmy said alien abductions. All right, I know what I'm expecting. And then I was like, PG-13. I still know what I'm expecting. They have a limited place to work within. But then it starts off with that scene of it zooming into the house and the sound, and you're like, okay, starting to lose my footing a little bit. All right, feeling a little uneasy. And then they do that other shot that I really liked where she goes to turn off her light and she clicks, and then it zooms out and it's an aerial shot of the house, and the aerial shot is clicking and turning in the same way that she just turned off the light. And it worked so well from one transition to another, but it was like, oh, and you're not expecting it. And then again, my footing was off, and I was like, oh. And then
right, that one was so good.
Yeah, and then when we got that lake shot, I was just like, oh.
Our bearings on reality are slowly just becoming like lost to the amazing cinematography of the movie. Yeah, it was great. I was expecting. I didn't have any expectations. I was just like, let's see what we got. Let's see what we got here, and I was pleasantly surprised. I think the one thing that sort of threw me off was not knowing that it was a very like undialogue, unwritten movie. Like it was written, like the things that happen are written scenes, all this sort of stuff. But the fact that, Caitlin herself, the actress, maybe says one line, like actually one line of dialogue throughout the movie, was a slightly like one of the things where halfway through I'm like, somebody should say a sentence. It's the real world. Someone should say one word. And I was like a little off put by that, but it did at the end of it all sort of sell this non-communicative between aliens, between people, between anybody. It's like some things can be known without words. Is that good to do in a movie? Is it fine? I don't know. I'm not going to like rate it on that sort of scale, but there was a moment where I was like, the bus driver has to say something about what's going on in words.
I definitely want to talk more about that, but you know what? We should say some words about some of our ad sponsors.
Yes, but before our many, many sponsors, Aaron, we were on an episode of another podcast.
Did you know? I did. I was there. Did all of you out there know that?
Out there, if you have ever checked out other podcasts besides this one, oh God, I hope you have. The podcast, we did an episode of No Highway Option. Check them out. No Highway Option Pod. It's a terrible podcast idea where they just show... They say any movie has to be graded against the beautiful masterpiece that is The Pacifier, where Vin Diesel says there's no highway option. I said it's a terrible idea. It's a hilarious idea. They're funny gents. We talked about the movie That Thing You Do, which was directed by Tom Hanks. And so we recommend you check that out. We had a lot of fun talking to the boys over there on their podcast. So we'll link it in this episode and maybe some future episodes as well, just to get some people listening over there. But yeah, we had a lot of fun talking about That Thing You Do from 1996 and listen to that song over and over and over again.
Yeah, definitely go check them out. It was a super fun time. Love talking with them. If you're looking for another fun podcast about movies, go check them out. But if they start being funnier than us and you start listening to them more than us, ooh, I'm going to feel betrayed.
No, you got to turn it off.
No, just kidding. Go check them out. They're fun.
They're very fun. They always have guests too. So unlike Aaron and I, where we're very antisocial, they'll have a new guest like every week, as far as I can tell. They'll just talk to whoever wants to watch movies with them, and that's really great. So check out them and then listen to these ads, and we'll be right back.
So yeah, I'm all for a gimmick. I love gimmicks in movies, but the gimmick has to, one, serve a purpose, and two, it has to be integrated. You know what? I'm gonna be extreme on this one. It has to be integrated seamlessly, such that there's no point in the movie where you look at it and say, does this need to be in here? And that is where we started going with that concept of not having any dialogue. And there were definitely times in the movie where you look at people and, they're having some interaction with each other and they're not saying anything. And you're like, all right, somebody would be saying something.
Bro, it was the sheriff's station for sure. Like, just the fact that there was so much time spent on the sheriff not saying anything was the tip over the iceberg, where I said, no. This man would say, have a nice day, man. Like some word would come out of this man's mouth. But the fact that he just went, he comes up real close to the camera and he goes, it was unacceptable to me.
Yeah, and like it was off-putting too, because there's other points in the film where background characters, you can hear them talking. It's definitely not, super out in the open, but like you hear people say things, and my subtitles were picking up things that people were saying. Ooh. And so I was like, I know that people are saying things. Why is nobody else talking, especially in a situation where something should be talking? And it made me think of A Quiet Place, right? In A Quiet Place, they don't say words. I mean, they do, but it has to be quiet, but the gimmick has a purpose. Aliens hear things and come kill you, so don't say anything. And this wasn't...
These were the Quiet Place aliens the whole time, actually.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that.
Same universe. If you look really far away, you'll see John Krasinski.
He's just looking at the camera and shaking his head.
He goes, yeah. I talk, but aliens.
I mean, maybe she saw that movie and then was like, just to be safe, I'm not going to say anything.
To humans or otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the one element of the film that I thought, I get it. I think it is fun to do a like constraint, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to draw a painting, but only use black and white or like grayscale, like that type of thing. But it did leave that sort of taste in your mouth where you're like, oh man, at the end of the movie, she better say, I'm tired of these fucking snakes on this fucking plane. Or, like I wanted something gimmicky, or it's PG-13. So you got one or two fucks in there. Like she just like exasperates, like, fuck, like that. I wanted something like that. And there is an effect where I don't want to spoil what she says, but I do think there is a little bit a dash of dialogue in here, and I think it's supposed to be the moment where you go like, oh, she didn't say anything throughout the film, so this one sentence that she says holds a lot of weight. It is the extent of what she needed to say throughout the film, and it was just at that moment I said, I don't know, should have said something else maybe.
Yeah, it made me think of, all right, this one's going to be out of left field, but in the movie Scrooged with
Jim Carrey?
No.
Oh, Bill Murray.
Bill Murray, thank you. Yeah, in the movie Scrooged with Bill Murray, you got
Scrooged.
Tiny Tim.
I heard Scrooge and I was just like, no. I don't think that movie's called Scrooge.
But you got Tiny Tim, who witnesses this horrible event and he becomes mute. And so he doesn't say anything. And,
right.
There's obviously something that happens to our main character in this movie. And I was thinking, okay, maybe it's kind of the same thing. But, you hear her exasperate things under her breath. And so you're like, okay, no, she can speak. And
she sings a little.
Yeah.
To the record. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's just like, I don't get what it was. Again, the gimmick was there. I just couldn't sense why it needed to be there.
Easier to write no dialogue, straight up.
True, but I mean, like, give me 12 or 15, 20 lines tops. It's something where, yes, when the thing happens on the bus and the bus driver stops and he looks back and he's like, hey, hey, like he didn't say he was just like, oh, but I think
They were all, he was so surprised he got a frog in his throat. He was like, oh, what's happening?
Or like the gimmick I would have loved was like, all right, give me the like lack of dialogue, but like we have that part at the very beginning where she like picks up the phone and you hear somebody be like, hey, you're such a fuck, and like they hang up before they get the fuck out. And so I think
was
like
that the fuck? Was that their fuck?
But they didn't get the full fuck. They just got pho.
She said pho.
Yeah.
And it's like, you wanted to order some pho?
And so I think the fun gimmick would have been like, that's the one line is like everybody's trying to get the F word out, but they keep cutting it before it gets the full fuck.
God, that would be so funny.
And so
she like rolls up the windows right when her neighbor's like, you fuck. And
yeah.
She like drives off.
The bus driver is looking back there and he's like, hey, what the fuck? But like hits the brakes as he's saying fuck. And
yes.
So
like, it does the screeching. They should have done that.
I'm not going to tell them how to make their movie, but
they should have done that. It would have been way funnier and stupider.
That's right. This is the movie review podcast where Jimmy and I take a movie and we make it more funny and stupid.
That's generally what our ideas are, is we're like, this could have been way goofier and then therefore more enjoyable for us.
Yeah, you know what made The Matrix better? Making Neo not know how to poop.
Don't spoil it. He never learned.
He never learned. So, to keep harping on it, I would have liked either just a little bit more dialogue or to have a reason for it. And, whether it was to make the one line that she says actually impactful, I still think having like a total of 20 lines total, so such that when she interacts with the sheriff, that could have been a very impactful moment where you're like, okay, there was dialogue there. I was supposed to pay attention and absorb that.
Yeah, I think that was the failing for me, where I see a scene where she gets spit on by this woman who you don't know how she's offended this woman in this way. And her, the husband of the woman who spit on her just goes, like there is a moment where you go, I would love some sort of human empathy or something to relate to in this moment, but somebody just going under their breath, like, is not ideal for me to sort of try and connect to that moment. And it's not that I need like I need to connect to every moment. It's more just like the fact that there was no dialogue meant that there was less of anything in that scene for it to be impactful with. So she walks out of the sheriff's office. I feel nothing because it feels like she was spit upon. She took it in stride. She left the sheriff's office. That's the end of that scene. If she gets a like knowing, like, it'll be okay, Bryn, like from the sheriff or something, like some connection, some humanity, I think there is an element there where I would go, that's where you do the dialogue. And where they used it in the movie, I go, whatever.
Yeah. It was also like I had total suspension of disbelief up until that point, and then I was like thrown very much out of the movie theater up into the sky.
It was literally just like, so it was shot in such a way too that made it like cheapened the moment, because she was like spit on, and so she's degraded in this extreme way. Like, to be spit on sucks. Like, what the fuck? That lady just literally destroyed your whole like being in this moment. The dad leaves, the husband leaves, the sheriff, and then it cuts to the two like other deputies at the desk, and they just like look the other way and go, they copy what the fucking sheriff says, and you're like, folks, hey, so even if they don't say anything to her, and I get it, she's like being boxed out of the community, she's a pariah, they would talk to each other like, oh, you're gonna fucking watch the Eagles games later? Like, I don't know. It just really, it was the one moment where I go, it feels bad to harp on it, but it was like, it felt pivotal to what needed to happen in the movie, and it just was like, well, we got to go pivotal somewhere else.
Yeah, I also think it was a little bit of a detriment to the movie where you don't need to explain everything to me in a movie, and especially not an alien movie. I can suspend disbelief and I can pick up a lot of things. But especially when you need to wrap up your movie and have some kind of conclusion to it that ends one way or another, it helps to have dialogue to say, okay, here is what's going to happen. Have so and so pop in at the end of War of the Worlds and say, or have Nelson Mandela pop in at the end of your movie and say, it was the diseases that killed the aliens in the end, and it was not the humans' weapons. Have something that explains the ending to me a little bit, just a little
Morgan
bit.
Freeman?
Thank you. You got there.
That feels so wrong, what you've just said.
So, when you're starting to wrap it up and you just don't have a dialogue, I'm like, all right, how are we going to do this so that whatever the aliens choose to do feels believable? And not to give away what happens in the end of this movie, because I think, this is in its own way kind of unique.
Yes.
It also felt like, all right, kind of out of left field, also kind of undeserved. I don't know.
But I do think, like, we harp on it, but there is an element to where I think the non-communicative speaking nature of both the aliens and the main character is the connection that they're supposed to share. So if you're a clicker or a human, click on back. It doesn't have to be an English spoken word. It can be some clicks, it can be some clacks, and we'll get on fine, right? Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know, cuz if it was like her trying to find some middle ground with them and whatever, I don't know, again, the lack of communication didn't serve a purpose, because you got the aliens who are clicking and clacking the whole way and they're communicating left and right. And
do they though? It felt like the clicking, that is the weird thing. It was the clicking of the aliens never seemed to be, actually no. You're right. There was specifically the big boy was clicking and clacking and moving his arms to essentially summon a mothership of some kind to beam me up, Scotty. But it was a mix of symbols with the arms and sort of a clicking communicative sort of thing.
He also had the moment when he was on top of the shed and she's running past it, and we were both like, oh, did you see that guy? And then he does the chirp whistle, which drew her attention to him.
Oh, that was a good one, because that was super, it was sing-songy in a not disturbing way, but because it's from them, you're like, oh no.
It was very much like a predator hunting a prey and hey, I know you're there and I'm going to get you.
Yeah, the toying with sort of sound where you're like, I'm coming.
Yeah.
Like a very, serial killer type sort of situation going on. Yeah. Again, dude, yeah. If anything is to be fully 10 out of 10, sound design is the unmatched, both with the soundtrack, score itself, Joseph Trapanese, I've always enjoyed his work, and just the sound design alone. There was from the creaking house, from the aliens, from the just sort of anything. Ooh, just being out in sort of the wilderness had a very good vibe to it, and good in the way where it was creepy and terrifying. And it's one of those type of movies where you're like, should all movies be headphone movies? Would a theater ever be able to stimulate that sort of oral feedback that you get from a headphones? And I think theaters have figured it out with sort of the Dolby, surround sound nonsense. But yeah, I think this movie in a theater with the sort of booming subwoofer and I think there would be so many elements to it that would kick ass in a theater.
Oh, dude, I'm right there with you. I would love to see this and hear one of those things behind me in a theater. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, that'd be good.
That's some pooping pants.
That's some pooping pants.
Dude, yeah, it was such a good, and it was like unique in a way where, yes, it does have the clickeriness of like the zombies from The Last of Us or the Predator, but like that is such a unique sound in its own that they were able to make it sound like nothing else that had existed before, while calling back to these previous sort of what's the Encounters is the one with like the doo 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 doo.
Yeah.
Like that sound in itself is basically a soundscape in the movie that they use, but to the horror effect, where yes, it is terrifying in Encounters, but it has that sort of like positive, like we're contacting another world, and in this one it's like we're contacting you.
Yeah. Yeah, I also liked it because it made me think of Arrival, where it's like, all right, do you try and figure out what they're saying, or is it just like this is them communicating, you have no hope of figuring out what they're saying, and you know that anytime you hear those sounds, you are screwed? And it was very much the latter.
Yeah, and I think Arrival did have sort of a similar oral soundscape for them, where there was like clicking and like sort of a yawning
Whales.
Abyssal sort of whale sounds. And yeah, it's like basically everyone was in this movie was just like, just do that, but actually they want to kill you.
Yeah.
And I mean, it worked. It was great. The aliens were significantly like a terrifying presence in the movie, and it was just her. It was just Caitlin. She was besieged by these creatures the entire movie, and I almost right in the beginning I thought, is this movie just this night, like her surviving a night encounter with them? And I mean, of course, the movie sustains a lot more than that, but I think it could have even done that. I think there is a movie where it just takes the single night and really escalates it to the end of this movie could like happen in one night. I think that would probably serve better than no dialogue, because there would be no denouement moment in the middle where she hops on a bus.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was just like a really good usage of time, of sound, of visuals, and like the color was great, and Caitlin like was very emotive and just like fully carried the movie handily, like no problem. I was engrossed in whatever she was doing, and she had like some wit to her in the beginning with the phone call, like immediately hanging it up and doing the dancing with the record and all this sort of stuff, and like sold it perfectly. I was just like, you are doing fantastic. You've sold this character to me. I hope you don't die, because I'm invested in what's going on with your life now. So yeah, it was like she was fantastic. I greatly enjoyed her performance in this.
Yeah, I would like to throw out an honorable mention to her, because it's rare that I like see a movie and I'm really like, oh, I'm engrossed in what this actor is doing. But like this is the first time I've seen her in anything, and she had just full control of every scene she was in. It was like anytime there was an emotion that she needed to like emote, she did it, and she did it so captivatingly that I was just like, I'm in it. I'm 100% in this, and that's what helped me suspend disbelief, was how good she was at acting. And like, you know, that I don't think I can say this without spoiling anything, but there's a moment where near the middle end you see her as she's kind of like covered in some grime and some dirt and stuff, and then you like get a split second hint to what she looked like at the beginning of the movie, where she's, you know, dressed up all nice. And it was just so funny, because it was just like, now you see these like absolute two different sides to her and her character, and like she did such a good job of playing both of them. And again, she just you said it. She did such a good job in this film.
Yeah. It's also a credit to the writing in terms of keeping her, like, she felt like one character, but you are right in terms of her journey in this movie makes her seem like a completely different person by the end of it. And rightfully so, it feels like, of course, you would be forever changed by a sort of visitation like this. But the way that visually she sells it, the costuming and like makeup and like all the stuff on her sells it in this way where you're like, she really does look like a different person. Like something has happened so irrevocably to this person where she looks forever changed, and you're like, she sold it perfectly.
Yeah. So, Jimmy, what do you think? Would you recommend this to people? Would you say, hey, sit down and spend an hour and a half of your life watching this movie?
Did you time this movie too? You time every movie?
I do very little research, but I remember we paused it a couple times, and I remember an hour and a half being in there.
Oh, you're right. There was a time at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can flat out say, without a doubt, I would recommend people watch this movie. It's a watch from me. Not only did the entire about 3/4 of the movie sell this sort of ominous, terrifying visitation vibe that I keep looking for in some, alien movies, where I'm like, visitation movies should be like this should be scary and like make me feel the dread of an ominous third party that I would have no knowledge of before, and all this sort of stuff. And the crop circles in the beginning are like the perfect, just like she tries to water it, right? She's like, oh, well, this shouldn't be this way. There's like that perfect, just like unknowableness to this movie that is sold so perfectly. And I will not spoil the ending because I so recommend people to watch this movie. I like 3/4 of the way through, I almost was like, is this doing it for me, or is this the point where I'm saying no? And then the end of the movie happens and I go, we're back in, baby. So there was a moment where I lost faith and I said, oh no, I can't really tell what's going on with this movie anymore. I don't know if it's got me in that same way. But by the end of it, I was fully bought back in, and it's a watch from me. What about you, Aaron?
It's a watch for me too. I had my suspension of disbelief broken with the dialogue thing. The dialogue thing was weird at points. I will say the end didn't sell it for me. I'm not going to give it away why. No. But it didn't vibe with me. I was like, that's not how I would have. I don't know. I was struggling to come up with a better ending, so I guess they gave me a good enough thing. Regardless of the suspension of disbelief breaking and regardless of the ending, this movie is still fan-freaking-tastic. Go watch it for her acting alone, and you will not be disappointed. I can't wait till she's in more stuff, because I think she's going to be a powerhouse. And, I'd love to see her with Kenneth Branagh, because, like, when I think of, like, powerhouse acting, funny enough, I always think of him. He's freaking amazing.
Dude, the Venice one's out. We got to watch that.
Oh, October! Yes, but she's a powerhouse, and I can't wait to see more. And the other thing that's just an absolute powerhouse is, like we've said, that sound design. Just the ominous vibe that is pervasive in this whole entire movie, and the fact that you will just be like, ooh, ooh, the whole time. You will see these creepy little guys and think, ooh, and you will hear things and see things, and it did it. And I said it 2 other times during this podcast alone. It's hard for a PG-13 movie to put me off edge. Yeah. It's hard. And, I think it's hard for a lot of people to get put off by a PG-13 movie, but this movie did it. And props to it for freaking doing that. Because, for that matter, it's easy to do it and to put somebody off edge with an R-rated movie. You can give them a Hostel. You can give them a Human Centipede. I was going to call it Human Caterpillar because my brain's wrong sometimes.
And the Hungry Caterpillar.
and you can give them a saw, and you can make people throw up in a theater, but to really grab somebody and use tricks of movie making and audio design to make somebody feel like their brain isn't working right is so devious, and I love it, and I love what they did, and I want more. And one of the things I couldn't help but think was, like, in a way, the aliens are almost a MacGuffin, where, like, if you took the aliens out and put in some other monster would work just as well, because of all the things that made this movie make you feel unsettled.
Yeah, I think that's totally right too. Is there's a core to what's going on in terms of setting her up as this pariah, as this socially outcast person, and she sells that just vibes so well that she could be in the dark fighting anything, and you'd just be totally terrified, because that's how it works.
Put her in a Lovecraft fighting unspeakable horrors, but use all of the same movie making tricks and the audio tricks, and it would have worked. But and for that matter, I will say again, the aliens worked really well too. It's hard, especially for a bipedal humanoid alien, to be weird and spooky in 2023. But these little creeps,
dude,
these grimy little weirdos.
Yeah, and it's not that we talked about it a lot, but it's like the darkness of this movie is the credit to where these VFX of these aliens thrives, because every introduction of them is like basically complete darkness. Either just their eyes are shining off ominously somewhere, or their form is even sort of a formless. You can't even tell what you're going to witness by the time they're like fully in some sort of light source. But yeah, I think that moment that sold us was the jarring, disorienting, wait, there's glass inside, but there's glass outside. Where are we? Are we safe? Are we, the audience, safe?
Yeah.
Like that moment alone was the full buy-in to the fantastical, sort of terrifying carnival that happens throughout the rest of the movie. And there's gets up on its little finky toes and floats out of the window. You're like, why did that happen now? There's just little pitch perfect things that happen throughout the movie that are just such a delight to watch, because it's like, this is our first October, spooky movie episode review. And I was like, this is a spooky one. Like, I've been watching a lot of bad spook, like quote unquote spooky stuff. And this one, like, genuinely was getting me a little shivering, it was messed up.
Yeah, I don't think I've been this put off, especially by an alien movie, since watching the 1980s The Thing. That movie, there's a scene in that movie where I was like, oh. And there were plenty of scenes in this movie where I was like, oh, no.
Yeah, plenty of times that I just fully unseated, like, yeah. I did like the Joaquin Phoenix in Signs, where you go, oh. I keep bringing it back to Signs because a similar alien style, kind of.
Yeah.
A little bit. And you can't help, I still think, Aaron, we got to rewatch Signs, because I think Signs is like a masterpiece, and you're like, Signs is fucking shitty. And I'm like, I don't know. I think that's M. Night Shyamalan's like maybe one of two good ones,
I'm down to rewatch that one, because I don't remember liking that movie. I could be wrong, and maybe time has changed things. Folks, if you're out there and you want us to watch Signs, put it in the comments.
We see you.
Yeah, if you want us to watch something else, especially during Spooktober, if you got a spooky movie that's going to make me go, then put it down in the comments. Let us know, because I am down to go,
Yeah, shout it out in the comments, or Spotify we do a Q&A, what should we watch? Answer that Q with that A of what movie you want us to watch. And if it's spooky and we get to it before this month, like, it's just how it's going to go. But in the meantime, that's been Too Much Popcorn. Yeah, I'm Jimmy, and that's Aaron, and we watch the movie and we tell you to watch it or not watch it. In this case, we had a blah 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 consensus mode. Blah 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 consensus mode. It was a very good union of ideas in which Aaron and I watched the movie and we both looked at each other afterwards, and we started the episode not saying that we were going to spoil anything, and we knew that we weren't going to spoil anything because together we said, you can't spoil the ending of this. You can't do that.
Yeah, go watch it.
We recommend the watch on that. It's both of us. No one will save you. Yeah, what a good movie. Thank you so much for listening to Too Much Popcorn. Again, check us out on No Highway Option. We had the That Thing You Do episode. We watched the movie with them and talked about it afterwards. It's not really like we chose the movie. Someone else suggested that movie, and then we will be on a later bonus episode where they will guess what movie we want them to watch later. So check out their feed later for the bonus sort of like oops all, guest suggestion episode. So we'll be in that one as well. But again, That Thing You Do, No Highway Option. And thank you so much for listening. Check us out anywhere you listen to podcasts. But for right now, we're still pushing for those Spotify ratings and listens. And have a good one. Bye.
Boo.
Ooh.